Good morning, everyone. I seem to be devoid of other panelists today, but nonetheless, I'm going to proceed with my reading and commentary of the Red Book. And so you may feel free to comment in the chat, and I will endeavor to include your comments in the chat in this discussion. And so we're reading from the Red Book by C.G. Jung. And I'm reading from the Reader's Edition, page 146. And this is chapter 5. And this occurred on December 12th, 1913. Descent into hell in the future. In the following night, the air was filled with many voices. A loud voice called, "I am falling," unquote. Others cried out confused and excited during this. "Where to? Where do you want? What do you want? Should I entrust myself to this confusion?" I shuddered. "It is a dreadful deep. Do you want me to leave myself to chance, to the madness of my own darkness? Whither? Whither? You fall, and I want to fall with you, whoever you are." The spirit of the depths opened my eyes, and I caught a glimpse of the inner things, the world of my soul, the many-formed and changing. Okay, so this morning I read a very, very interesting article, which if you send me an email to skip.conover@gmail.com, I will be happy to forward to you. But in it, there's an article that really talks about Jung's personal initiation, and it basically describes the Red Book as Jung's own initiation into life. Now, for women, that initiation most commonly happens, and this is the initiation to the importance of the inner world. And it seems to me that for women, that initiation occurs automatically when they have a child. Okay, when they deliver a baby, they are overcome by the archetype of mother, and that will never end until the day of her death. But for men, this is a more difficult thing to be initiated into the inner world. And it also is difficult for women who've never become a mother. And so I've been thinking about that a lot in the last week, and I'm looking at the latest edition of the Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul in the 21st Century, an Aranos Symposium. This is volume 5 of this series. And in this book, one of the very first articles, the first article after the editor, Murray Stein, is an article by Romano Madeira, who's an Italian Jungian analyst. And his article is called "The Future of the Spirit in the Red Book and in Our Time." And he begins it with this sentence: "A myth may be thought of as a story that contains what a culture needs to know." And this brings up what we are doing in our confluence over the next few months, which is we are going to create the myth for our future time. And we're going to do that through various artistic methods. We started to do it in Helena, Montana last June, and we will be continuing this fall on the 13th to 16th of October at the Mount Madonna Retreat Center in Watsonville, California. We hope you'll think about joining us at that time. The cost of the program will be approximately $495 plus lodging and meals. And so, and the lodging and meals are sort of your choice. It can be as fine as a room with 1 or 2 beds in it, or you can camp on the site if you want to, as according to my understanding. But anyway, that's what we'll be doing in October. And I was also reading this morning about initiation, and about the Red Book being an initiation. In this case, Jung's initiation. And if we think of it in that way, then we're able to understand what it is that Jung's Red Book can bring to all of us, because it can show us what an initiation is. Now, in my case, I did this backwards, because in 1993, I was possessed by my anima archetype, and she required me to write a novel, and I had to do that. I had to work on it every day, and she wasn't going to leave me alone until I finished it, until I finished her story. And so it's basically the autobiography of my personal anima. It doesn't mean it would be your anima. It has to do with me, the same as the Red Book has to do with Dr. Jung's initiation. But what you can receive an understanding and understand from both works is what an initiation looks like. And it's an initiation into the unconscious world and how that works, and what we should be taking from it. And it often comes, the requirement for it often comes at the midlife crisis, which is actually what all Jungian analysts are doing. They're actually serving as shamans to carry one through this initiation. And I personally have never been able to afford a Jungian analysis, and never have had one, except by reading Dr. Jung. I have understood what it is and what it means to me, and therefore I'm able to give all of you a little bit of a sense of what this is about. And so I'll put the name of my novel. It's only available in Kindle form, and you can find it on Amazon. And as I say, I wrote it under my pen name, which is David Garrett Son, in 1993. But that is the autobiography of my personal anima for a period of time from 1962 through the time that I was, well, actually it's through current time, because it carries the heroine of the story, who is my anima, up through 2015 or so. And putting it all together now after a lifetime or 35 years of study of Jungian psychology, I'm starting to get what it all means and what the initiation is about. And all of us need that one way or another. And it doesn't mean we're going crazy. It means that we have to learn about the unconscious and what immortality means. Now, to me, and based on Dr. Jung's writings, I have come to know that immortality relates to what you leave behind in your lifetime. From a physical point of view, when we die, we're just a dead animal, and no more or less important than any other dead animal. But from a spiritual and a psychic point of view, from the point of view of the psyche, what we do in our works during our lifetime is a representation of our spirit, and that we do leave behind. And so all of our mothers have left their spirit in all of us, and all of our mothers, going back to single-celled organisms, have done two things successfully. They survived until they reproduced. They survived until they reproduced, going all the way back through millions of generations till the time we became human beings and are in our current form. And so their legacy, the legacy of all of our ancestors, is they did those two things successfully. And we are the representation of their hopes and fears. At least that's what I believe. And that's what I know, because I have been through my own initiation in various forms, and it has been reconfirmed. That initiation has been reconfirmed to me personally over and over again. But unless you have that experience, which in religious circles, that would be called a religious experience. In Jungian circles, it's called a numinous experience. Unless you've had that actual experience, you wouldn't particularly understand it. You're simply believing what other people tell you about life. And so, when fundamentalists tell you, oh, you have to have faith, you have to believe, as Jung said in his interview, he has no need to believe, he knows. And once you've had this experience at least once, then you do know, and you don't have to believe what anybody else tells you. And that's my personal experience, and I hope it helps you to the extent it can. Okay, so you all see that I've shaved my mustache since last week, I believe, and the essence of that is that our friends Murray Stein and Henry Abramovich, who wrote The Analyst and the Rabbi, that play, are writing another play, which was thought to be done this year. So I was keeping my mustache from my role as C.G. Jung to play in that, but that's not quite ready. So it's not going to be ready until 2024. And so I decided to shave my mustache in honor of that fact that I am not C.G. Jung. I know I'm not C.G. Jung. And at the time that we consider producing the new play by Stein and Abramovich, then I'll grow it back because the new play is a follow-on to the events of the analyst and the rabbi. In other words, in 1946, these two gentlemen had their meeting, which you can find as the leading thing on this YouTube channel. You can actually see the play as we performed it in June of 2022. But that wasn't the end of it. These gentlemen met at least one more time in 1947 at the Aranos Conference. And so the forthcoming play is going to have several additional characters who are famous in Jungian circles. Father Victor White, for example, and Olga Freebie Captain, who was the organizer of the Aranos conferences for many, many years, and a couple of others. And so the play will be a little bigger event next year, but it's probably not going to be performed by us, at least, for about 18 months. So this year we probably will be doing something that points to another play of Murray Stein's, although I don't think we're going to act it dramatically. I think we will do a dramatic reading in part, but that the two roles do not involve Dr. Jung himself, but rather Murray Stein and Thomas Arst, who were the co-editors of this book, Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Conditions. And there are 5 volumes of that work, and Dr. Stein and Dr. Arst were the main editors of it. So I'm going to read on, and I'll just read that last paragraph that I have already read again. It is, the spirit of the depths opened my eyes, and I caught a glimpse of the inner things, the world of my soul, the many-formed and changing. Okay, so this was the moment of Jung's initiation, of opening his eyes to the world of the psyche in a new way, his initiation. I'll read on. Page 147. I see a gray rock face along which I sink into greater depths. I stand in black dirt up to my ankles and in a dark cave. Shadows sweep over me. I am seized by fear, but I know I must go in. I crawl through a narrow crack in the rock and reach an inner cave whose bottom is covered with black water. But beyond this, I catch a glimpse of a luminous red stone, which I must reach. I wade through the muddy water. The cave is full of the frightful noise of shrieking voices. I take the stone. It covers a dark opening in the rock. I hold the stone in my hand, peering around inquiringly. I do not want to listen to the voices. They keep me away. But I want to know. Here something wants to be uttered. I place my ear to the opening. I hear the flow of underground waters. I see the bloody head of a man on the dark stream. Someone wounded, someone slain floats there. I take in this image for a long time, shuddering. I see a large black scarab floating past on the dark stream. In the deepest reach of the stream shines a red sun, radiating through the dark water. There I see, and a terror seizes me, small serpents on the rock walls, striving toward the depths. where the sun shines. 1,000 serpents crowd around, veiling the sun. Deep nights falls. A red stream of blood, thick red blood springs up, surging for a long time, then ebbing. I am seized by fear. What did I see? Okay, so I think most of you will have seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, the entire series with Harrison Ford, and you will know that he hates snakes. And what Harrison Ford is seeing in the physical world is what actually is in the unconscious world, the psyche. And so our serpent, our ancestors learned to be instinctually afraid of serpents, and they took to the trees in order to avoid serpents, as we all probably know. And even today, if you have this falling sensation, if you're in bed and all of a sudden you feel like you're falling, that's an instinctual reaction to falling out of a limb and possibly to your death, either because you break your neck hitting the ground, or because if you get down there, some predator, and might well be a snake, is down there and will kill you. And so we learn to be instinctually staying up in the trees, and so that's what Jung is seeing. He's seeing these serpents on the walls, and it's what Harrison Ford in Raiders of the Lost Ark showed us multiple times, which was piles of snakes, which obviously repulses all of us because they're so archetypal and so fearsome to most people. Obviously, some people get over their fear and learn to live with snakes or tame them. I don't know if you actually ever tame a snake. I think there are cobra keepers who have gone to their death thinking that they had tamed their cobra. But in any case, snakes are a fearsome archetypal image, and I'm sure that ancient men and women ran across fossils of dinosaurs and thought that those large heads, the skeletons of those large heads, were actually skeletons of dragons, and as they described them. And so the myth grew up about what these dragons could do, that they could breathe fire and so on. I don't think any of them actually ever did, but you can imagine what would come into an ancient person's head in the course of thinking about what those fossils actually mean. So anyway, heal the wounds that doubt inflicts on me, my soul. That too is to be overcome, so that I can recognize your supreme meaning, how far away everything is and how I have turned back. My spirit is a spirit of torment. It tears asunder my contemplation. It would dismantle everything and rip it apart. I am still a victim of my thinking. When can I order my thinking to be quiet so that my thoughts, those unruly hounds, will crawl to my feet? How can I ever hope to hear your voice louder, to see your face clearer when all my thoughts howl. Okay, so obviously he's in his initial stages in his active imagination, and he's introduced to the contents of his psyche in a very dramatic way, and those contents are quite fearsome as he describes them here. Yeah, let's see here. I was looking for where this footnote comes in because there is an important footnote. I'll just read it. Jung narrated this episode in his 1925 seminar, stressing different details. He commented, "When I came out of the fantasy, I realized that my mechanism had worked wonderfully well, but I was in great confusion as to the meaning of all those things I had seen. The light in the cave from the crystal was, I thought, like the stone of wisdom. The secret murder of the hero I could not understand at all. The beetle, of course, I knew to be an ancient sun symbol, and the setting sun, the luminous red disk, was archetypal. The serpents I thought might have been connected with Egyptian material. I could not then realize that it was also archetypal. I need not seek connections. I was able to link the picture up with the sea of blood I had previously fantasized about. Though I could not then grasp the significance of the hero killed, soon after I had a dream in which Siegfried was killed by myself. It was a case of destroying the hero ideal of my own efficiency. This has to be sacrificed in order that a new adaptation can be made. In short, it is connected with the sacrifice of the superior function in order to get at the libido necessary to activate the inferior functions." And that's from Introduction to Jungian Psychology, page 52 and following. The killing of Siegfried occurs below in chapter 7. Jung also anonymously cited and discussed this fantasy in his ETH lecture on June 14th, 1935, from a book entitled Modern Psychology, volumes 1 and 2, page 222. Okay, so Jung is facing these images. He doesn't know what it means yet. He has to work that out over his lifetime, and he does do. But at that point, he didn't know what all these symbols were, with the exception of the beetle. And so I'll read on. I am stunned, but I want to be stunned, since I have sworn to you, my soul, to trust you even if you lead me through madness. How shall I ever walk under your sun if I do not drink the bitter draught of slumber to the lees? Help me so that I do not choke on my own knowledge. The fullness of my knowledge threatens to fall in on me. My knowledge has 1,000 voices, an army roaring like lions. The air trembles when they speak, and I am their defenseless sacrifice. Keep it far from me. Keep it far from me, science. Science that clever. Keep it far from me, science, that clever knower. That bad prison master who binds the soul and imprisons it in a lightless cell. But above all, protect me from the serpent of judgment, which only appears to be a healing serpent, yet in your depths is infernal poison and agonizing death. I want to go down cleansed into your depths with white garments and not rush in like some thief, seizing whatever I can and fleeing breathlessly. Let me persist in divine astonishment so that I am ready to behold your wonders. Let me lay your head on a stone before your door so that I am prepared to receive your light. Okay, so this comes in sort of the form of a prayer. Jung at this point is understanding that organized religion basically fills this space in people who are what we would call true believers, people who do have faith and not pretend faith as in, I believe. And no, it's not like that. But certainly it is true that religions do see us through this midlife crisis issue with images that keep control of the situation. And as a result, people who are true believers, who know, people who know, have no need for analytical psychology because their psyche is being directed and guided through this time by the traditional religions. But for the rest of us, and this is true of a very large part of the world now, and that Nietzsche identified this when he said, God is dead and we have killed him. For those of the rest of us who do not know in the Christian sense or in any religious sense, we need something else. So we need to know what it is that we're missing. And what it is we're missing is true initiation of doing something that takes us into the unconscious and opens up that path. As my little statement from Lawrence Jaffe says, and I'll hold it up, although you might not be able to see this. Let me get rid of my background for a minute so that you can see it. Okay, so the purpose of Jung's whole psychology is to make accessible to us that healing power, which, let me read it forwards, which resides in our unconscious, that healing power, which resides in our unconscious. And that's by Dr. Lawrence Jaffe, and it's in his book on page 41. But that really sums up Jungian psychology, is that Jung's work opens our psyche to the healing power that we actually possess within our unconscious. And it comes to us in so many ways I can't even begin to tell you, but Jung is gradually opening his own, and obviously his own is quite complex because he, by this time, was a long practicing professional psychiatrist. But most of us have no idea what this is about. And the answer is that our psyche will give us an answer if we give it a chance. I mean, that's the benefit of prayer or meditation, is that if we get out of the way with our everyday problems, our psyche will tell us what to do next. You know, we can have all kinds of trauma, and if we get out of the way of our psyche being totally overwhelmed by that trauma, then we can find the answer. Our psyche will present an answer. It won't be the same answer in everybody's situation. I mean, I think of a dying man on the battlefield who looks up, and suddenly his psyche opens up and he sees Christ coming to get him. Okay, and it's a healing thing for that person who is in the process of dying, but he can be healed in the last moments by having that healing power come to him. But it can happen in any circumstances, and the question is, how do you get initiated into that healing power that exists in our unconscious? I mean, that's the fundamental purpose or the fundamental thing that Jungian analysis does. But it does it very quietly because Jungian analysts don't share this information. And so if you're a layman like me, you have to go and dig it out and finally figure out what it's all about. And that's why I've been doing this YouTube channel for the last, how many years? 7 years. So anyway. Okay, so reading on. When the desert begins to bloom, it brings forth strange plants. You will consider yourself mad, and in a certain sense, you will in fact be mad, to the extent that the Christianity of this time lacks madness, it lacks divine life. Take note of what the ancients taught us in images. Madness is divine, but because the ancients, I need to turn the page. But because the ancients lived this image concretely in events, it became a deception for us, since we became masters of the reality of the world. It is unquestionable, if you enter into the world of the soul, you are like a madman, and a doctor would consider you to be sick. But I say here, what I say here can be seen as sickness, but no one can see it as sickness more than I do. Okay, well, Jung later said, if you're a psychologist and you think of your clients as sick, you haven't understood your role, which is to help them open the conduit to their unconscious. This is how I overcame madness. If you do not know what divine madness is, suspend judgment and wait for the fruit. But know that there is a divine madness, which is nothing other than the overpowering of the spirit of this time through the spirit of the depths. Speak then of sick delusion, when the spirit of the depths can no longer stay down and forces a man to speak in tongues instead of in human speech, and makes him believe that he himself is the spirit of the depths. But also speak of sick delusion, when the spirit of this time does not leave a man and forces him to see only the surface, to deny the spirit of the depths, and to take himself for the spirit of the times. The spirit of this time is ungodly. The spirit of the depths is ungodly. Balance is godly. Okay, so who do we know in the physical world who thinks of himself as the spirit of this time? I'll leave it at that. Yes, Mr. or Miss Balaz, this is live at this moment, and you may continue at the moment. I'm not very pleased by your handle, but I'll leave it at that for the moment. Because I was caught up in the spirit of this time, precisely what happened to me on this night had to happen to me, namely that the spirit of the depths erupted with force and swept away the spirit of this time with a powerful wave. But the spirit of the depths had gained this power because I had spoken to my soul during 25 nights in the desert, and I had given her all my love and submission. But during the 25 days, I gave all my love and submission to things, to men, and to the thoughts of this time. I went into the desert only at night. Okay, so remember the Red Book begins with Jung saying, my soul, do you hear me? I call you. And in the beginning of this time, Jung, of course, is overwhelmed by his own learning, by being a PhD psychiatrist and of some experience. So he had lots of stuff in him. He'd learned in the classical method in university. And so his mind was completely full of the typical junk that you get if you go and become a PhD. And so he had to somehow overcome that. So in his imagination, he had gone into the desert. And he had to go there for 25 nights before anything began to happen. And then is when all this stuff started to happen, and he started to get in connection with his soul, and he started to see the existence of and the power of his unconscious. And by doing that, he was able to keep working on this Red Book, and it's a very carefully crafted document. Most of the events in the Red Book occur before August of 1914. So in this period between October 12th, 1913 and August 1st, 1914, when World War I begins, Jung is in the main part of his Red Book period. Now, the Red Book period does go on for 5 years or so, but then it takes him another 15 years before he fully articulates it in the folio edition that he had. It was, think of it as his scrapbook of his ideas. And it actually wasn't even a scrapbook, because the black books are really the scrapbook. But then as he was writing the black books, he decided to make a formal publishable record of it. And so that's what he did. Now, in my case, I wasn't benefited by being a PhD in psychiatry and or being an MD in psychiatry. He was an MD, and he was sort of one of the founders of what today we call psychology. I never took a psychology course, never once. And you can take that as a caveat emptor, but at the same time, I went through a very similar period in 1993 that was in the form of this novel, and the novel wrote itself. My anima awakened me every morning at 6 a.m. and forced me to go to the computer. I decided to go to the computer in the dark and to turn the monitor down as low as I possibly could so it wouldn't wake me up. And bring me back into my conscious mind. And then I simply put my hands on the keyboard, and I have no recollection of actually conjuring this novel. It just came. It was the story of my anima. And I know very well that it is a true story because I lived it. And I was personally shocked by the portions of it that can be kindly referred to as erotic. But nonetheless, this was the story that my anima required me to tell, and what I didn't have the option of stopping. Okay, she was a figure of a 15-year-old woman, Japanese woman in kimono, and she would wake me up every morning, and I would wake up and see her there standing next to my bed. And then I would go and put my hands on the keyboard and have these visions, which turned into this novel. And I was, actually seeing it in my psyche like a movie. And so, because of the content, initially, I put this novel in my desk for 21 years, but I finally published it in Kindle form in 2014. And but meanwhile, I had been studying Jungian psychology for years, and so I was familiar with the general contours of his psychology. And finally, when the Red Book was published in 2009, I said, aha, if the greatest psychiatrists and psychologists of the 20th century could have this kind of an experience, then it was okay if I had this experience, which is what then that regularized the experience in my own psyche. It took another 5 years to come to grips with that, but finally I decided that when I was 70 years old, I would publish it, and so I did. Hi, Patrick. Nice to see you. Susan, nice to see you. All right, so reading on here. And so here he's just told us that he didn't have the same kind of experience I did. I had an experience which was a possession, where I had had this thought after Norman Schwarzkopf's War Parade that I should write a novel. And I had read an article by Michael Crichton in the Wall Street Journal in which he said the way you write a novel is you ask a question. And so what came to me at that time was the fact that when I was 15 years old, we had a live-in maid in Japan. She was a young Japanese woman, a little older than me. And I asked one Saturday morning, I asked my father when I was 15, how did it happen that this woman came to me? And my father said, well, in Japan, young women come to Tokyo to earn their dowry, quote unquote. And I'll leave it to your imagination to guess what that means. But this story that I wrote is the story of a young farm girl who ends up going to Tokyo, not voluntarily, and ultimately becomes the first woman prime minister of Japan. There's been no such person as yet, although there may be one sometime in the near future, I understand, but as of now, that is not the case. And so I'm going to read on now. So Jung had to go 25 days before he had any sort of experience. And he was doing this around his practice, so he was doing it only in the evening. And so I'll just read the last couple of sentences again and then go on. I gave all my love and submission to things, to men, and to the thoughts of this time. I went into the desert only at night. Thus can you differentiate sick and divine delusion. Whoever does the one and does without the other, you can call sick, since he is out of balance. But who can withstand fear when the divine intoxication and madness comes to him? Love, soul, and God are beautiful and terrible. The ancients brought over some of the beauty of God into this world, and this world became so beautiful that it appeared to the spirit of the time to be fulfillment and better than the bosom of the Godhead. The frightfulness and cruelty of the world lay under wraps and in the depths of our hearts. If the spirit of the depths seizes you, you will feel the cruelty and cry out in torment. The spirit of the depths is pregnant with iron, fire, and death. You are right to fear the spirit of the depths, as he is full of horror. You see in these days what the spirit of the depths bore. You did not believe it, but you would have known you would have known it if you had taken counsel without your fear. Blood shone in me from the red light of the crystal, and when I picked up to discover its mystery, there lay the horror uncovered before me. In the depths of what is to come lay murder. The blonde hero lay slain. The black beetle is the death that is necessary for renewal. And so thereafter, a new sun glowed, the sun of the depths. Full of riddles, a sun of the night. And as the rising sun of spring quickens the dead earth, so the sun of the depths quickened the dead. And thus began the terrible struggle between light and darkness. Out of that burst the powerful and even unvanquished source of blood. This was what was to come, which you now experience in your life, and it is even more than that. And he has in parentheses, I had this vision on the night of 12 December, 1913. So here the spirit of the depths is warning him of the oncoming World War I, which was unconscious to most people. Most people didn't realize it was coming. And Jung himself didn't realize that he was having dreams and visions which prefigured World War I. And it wasn't until the war actually broke out that he realized that these were all prefigurations of World War I that were in the collective, but he was not conscious of it, and neither was anyone else. So during this time, he really didn't understand what his psychiatric situation was. He was experimenting, but he was wary. And he said that on August 1st, 1914, which was the day war broke out, he was the happiest person on the earth, because then he knew he wasn't going crazy. So anyway, he had said, he makes this parenthetical note, I had this vision on the night of 12 December 1913, so this is still 7.5 months before the war broke out, going on. Depths and surface should mix so that new life can develop. Yet the new life does not develop outside of us, but within us. What happens outside us in these days is the image that the peoples live in events, to bequeath this image immemorially to far-off times so that they might learn from it for their own way, just as we learned from the images that the ancients had lived before us in events. Life does not come from events, but from us. Everything that happens outside has already been. And then the following passage is in italics. I'll read through it without stopping. Therefore, whoever considers the event from outside always sees only that it already was, and that it is always the same. But whoever looks from inside knows that everything is new. The events that happen are always the same, but the creative depths of man are not always the same. Events signify nothing. They signify only in us. We create the meaning of events. The meaning is and always was artificial. We make it. Because of this, we seek in ourselves the meaning of events, so that the way of what is to come becomes apparent and our life can flow again. That which you need comes from yourself, namely the meaning of the event. The meaning of events is not their particular meaning. This meaning exists in learned books. Events have no meaning. The meaning of events is the way of salvation that you create. The meaning of events comes from the possibility of life in this world that you create. It is the mastery of this world and the assertion of your soul in this world. This meaning of events is the supreme meaning that is not in events and not in the soul, but is the God standing between events and the soul, the mediator of life, the way, the bridge, and the going across. Okay, so now, in terms of the United States as compared to all other countries in the world, we see more and more mass killings using automatic weapons, and we see also, and on a similar vein, we see a lot of police violence that results in most often a Black man being killed. And those are events that are happening over and over in the United States. But as what Dr. Jung is saying is, those events by themselves have no meaning, but what will emerge from our unconscious, and this can only be told in the future, I suppose. So when you're watching this video in the future, you probably will understand what the meaning is, but from our collective unconscious will emerge the solution. I cannot imagine in another decade that this is going to continue to be the case, that we have mass shootings 1.5 to 2 times a day in this country, and we have a killing of an unarmed Black man by police officers at least once a month or every couple of weeks in this country. And obviously they're both horrific, and they involve blood. And because they involve blood, all of our unconsciouses are working on that problem, and the solution will emerge in due course. I don't know where it will emerge from. I think in part it may emerge from us reading the first 4 words of the Second Amendment, which are a well-organized militia. Those are the first 4 words of the Second Amendment. And so if we understand that the Second Amendment applies to a well-organized militia and not to every Tom, Dick, and Harry in the country having an Uzi, then we can start to find a solution to our gun problem. As for the policing problem, that's quite different, but our collective solution will emerge from us. But both of those are repetitive events that by themselves have no particular meaning, but they are pushing forward a solution in the unconscious, which will ultimately emerge. Patrick Hollywood says, does society need blood to propel herself to evolve? And the answer to that is quite definitely yes. And that is one of the major lessons that emerges from the Red Book over time. Patrick says, is that part of the ingredient? I wonder. And the answer to your question, Patrick, is yes. Most definitely is. And I actually wrote an article about this on the Archetype in Action website, which you can look up. And the name of the article is There Will Be Blood. And I talk about when I realized that the Red Book is about blood being the lubricant that causes us gradually to evolve and change. Let's see. Okay, I'm not quite sure I'm following your train of thought here, Patrick. But yes, Jung was a trailblazer. And could you imagine the feeling one would have after coming to that revelation? Yes, I can, because as I say, I had that revelation some years ago and wrote this essay on it. I don't even remember when I wrote it. I suppose I could very quickly find it myself on, let me see if I can find it on Archetype in Action. Just a second. If I can find it, then I can give you the link right away. It's taking some time. Okay. Search. If for some reason there's a problem here. Just a second. Okay, there it is. All right, I will give you the link to the article. And the article was published. Let's see if I can find the date. Well, I can't easily find the date here that I published it, but it was now years ago. And so here's the link to my article on There Will Be Blood. And I make the observation that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. recognized this too, and I give a link to his speech the night before he was assassinated. And so Nasreen Samad says, does more bloodshed and violence mean better chances of evolution? Sadly, I have to say the answer to that is yes. Not because I like it, but because it seems to be true, and it seems to be a major part of Dr. Jung's message here. There are 8 billion of us, and we're all at different levels of evolution. So anyway, going on page 153, I would not have been able to see what was to come if I could not have seen it in myself. Therefore, I take part in that murder. The sun of the depths also shines in me after the murder has been accomplished. The 1,000 serpents that want to devour the sun are also in me. I myself am a murderer and murdered, sacrificer and sacrificed. The upwelling blood streams out of me. You all have a share in the murder. In you, the reborn one will come to be, and the sun of the depths will rise, and 1,000 serpents will develop from your dead matter and fall on the sun to choke it. Your blood will stream forth. The peoples demonstrate this at the present time in unforgettable acts, which will be written with blood in unforgettable books for eternal memory. I think I should read these two footnotes here. Jung elaborated the theme of collective guilt in, quote, After the Catastrophe, unquote. That was the name of his essay, which is in Collected Work 10. And the references to events of World War I, the autumn of 1914, when Jung wrote this section of Layer 2, saw the Battle of the Marne and the First Battle of Ypres. Okay, so Jung was seeing lots of blood at the time, and of course, when he was writing it in the Red Book as opposed to in the Black Books, he was going back and recalling, where he was at this time when he was writing it in the Black Books, and that's why. I need to decide whether to actually read the Black Books after reading the Red Book, because there are so many things that he actually left out of the Red Book that we could then go back and speculate on why he left them out and what the meaning of his changing certain words was and so on. And then Patrick says, probably yes, then people would work harder to prevent the blood. It's pretty wild to think about. I wonder if blood could be considered a loss function. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go ask ChatGPT and see what it says. Okay, well, that'll be interesting. Do let us know. Okay, so I've read the footnotes. Now I'm going to go on. But I ask you, when do men fall on their brothers with mighty weapons and bloody axe? They do such if they do not know that their brother is themselves. They themselves are sacrificers but they mutually do the service of the sacrifice. They must all sacrifice each other, since the time has not yet come when man puts the bloody knife into himself in order to sacrifice the one he kills in his brother. But whom do people kill? They kill the noble, the brave, the heroes. They take aim at these and do not know that with these they mean themselves. They should sacrifice the hero and themselves, and because they do not know this, they kill their courageous brother. The time is still ripe, but through this blood sacrifice, it should ripen. So long as it is possible to murder the brother instead of oneself, the time is not yet ripe. Frightful things must happen until men grow ripe, but anything else will not ripen humanity. Hence, all this that takes place in these days must also be so that the renewal can come. Since the source of blood that follows, the shrouding of the sun is also the source of the new life. And so I just would step aside and mention that we could easily apply this to Ukraine and why the Ukrainians will ultimately win this war, regardless of what happens on the battlefield. And if you doubt me, watch the movie Mr. Jones, made in 2019, which shows what Stalin did to the Ukrainians, and you'll understand why the Ukrainians will never stop, and that Russia cannot win. And going on now. As the fate of the peoples is represented to you in events, so will it happen in your heart. If the hero in you is slain, then the sun of the depths rises in you, glowing from afar and from a dreadful place. But all the same, everything that up till now seemed to be dead in you will come to life and will change into poisonous serpents that will cover the sun, and you will fall into night and confusion. Your blood also will stream from many wounds in this frightful struggle. Your shock and doubt will be great, but from such torment the new life will be born. Birth is blood and torment. Your darkness, which you did not suspect since it was dead, will come to life, and you will feel the crush of total evil and the conflicts of life that still now lie buried in the matter of your body. But the serpents are dreadful evil thoughts and feelings. I'll read that again. But the serpents are dreadful evil thoughts and feelings. You thought you were that abyss. Oh, you clever people, it is another thing to experience it. Everything will happen to you. Think of all the frightful and devilish things that men have inflicted on their brothers. That should happen to you in your heart. Suffer it yourself through your own hand, and know that it is your own heinous and devilish hand that inflicts the suffering on you, but not your brother, who wrestles with his own devils. I would like you to see what the murdered hero means. Those nameless men who in our day have murdered a prince are blind prophets who demonstrate in events what then is valid only for the soul. Through the murder of princes, we will learn that the prince in us, the hero, is threatened. Whether this should be seen as good or a bad sign need not concern us. What is awful today is good in 100 years, and in 200 years is bad again. But we must recognize what is happening. There are nameless ones in you who threaten your prince and hereditary ruler. But our ruler is the spirit of this time, which rules and leads in us all. It is the general spirit in which we think and act today. He is the frightful power, since he has brought immeasurable good to this world and fascinated men with unbelievable pleasure. He is bejeweled with the most beautiful heroic virtue and wants to drive men up to the brightest solar heights in everlasting ascent. The hero wants to open up everything he can, but the nameless spirit of the depths evokes everything that man cannot. Incapacity prevents further ascent. Greater height requires greater virtue. We do not possess it. We must first create it by learning to live with our incapacity. We must give it to life, for how else shall it develop into ability? We cannot slay our incapacity and rise above it, but that is precisely what we wanted. Incapacity will overcome us and demand its share of life. Our ability will desert us, and we will believe in the sense of the spirit of this time that it is a loss. Yet it is no loss, but a gain, not for outer trappings, however, but for inner capability. The one who learns to live with his incapacity has learned a great deal. This will lead us to the valuation of the smallest things and to wise limitation, which the greater height demands. If all heroism is erased, we fall back into the misery of humanity and to even worse. Our foundations will be caught up in excitement, since our highest tension, which concerns what lies outside us, will stir them up. We will fall into the cesspool of our underworld, among the rubble of all the centuries in us. The heroic in you is the fact that you are ruled by the thought that this or that is good, that this or that performance is indispensable, this or that cause is objectionable, this or that goal must be attained in headlong striving work, this or that pleasure should be ruthlessly repressed at all costs. Consequently, you sin against incapacity, but incapacity exists. No one should deny it, find fault with it, or shout it down. Okay. And I'll read a footnote here, or two footnotes. Everything that we have forgotten will be revived, each human and divine passion, the black serpents and the reddish sun of the depths. Okay, that it says the draft continues with that. And then at the end of this passage, on June 9, 1917, there was a discussion of the psychology of the World War in the Association of Analytical Psychology, following a presentation by Jules Bedoz on the Song of Roland. Jung argued that hypothetically the World War can be raised to the subjective level. In detail, the authoritarian principle, taking action on the basis of principles, clashes with the emotional principle. The collective unconscious enters into allegiance with the emotional. Concerning the hero, he said, the hero, the beloved figure of the people, should fall. All heroes bring themselves down by carrying the hero attitude beyond a certain limit, and hence lose their footing. And then another passage, he says, the psychological interpretation of the First World War on the subjective level describes what is developed in this chapter. The connection between individual and collective psychology, which he articulates here, forms one of the leitmotifs of his later work. he's referring here to an essay called Present and Future, which appears in Collected Works 10. Okay, I am going to stop at this point, except to go back and look at your comments, because my voice is giving out. Normally, I have a fellow panelist who can give my voice a little rest, but anyway, okay, so Patrick says, then people would work harder to prevent blood. It's pretty wild to think about. I wonder if blood could be considered a loss function. I am going to ask, okay, so he was going to ask, Susan says, what comes to my mind, Patrick, is whether blood is a cost of evolution. I would go way down a rabbit hole thinking through your question. That is a great question. I had a dream one time where I was standing there looking at myself. The self I was looking at told me that I was not asking the correct question. And hey, Mario says, no, don't go. So here's what I would say. One of the things that we're going to be doing this fall in our confluence is we're going to begin the process of writing a myth for our time. And this quote that I began this session on, which appears in Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul in the 21st Century, in the article by Romano Madeira entitled The Future of the Spirit in the Red Book and in Our Time, his first sentence is, a myth may be thought of as a story that contains what a culture needs to know. And so we are going to begin in the fall with a collage, which will be an individual collage on what is the myth that the soul needs to know, or what is the story that we need to know. And we will do individual collages, and then we are going to take one part of our personal collage and put that in a collective collage, a major collective collage for the weekend. And at the end of the weekend, we're going to have a pretty major collective collage, and that will be the beginning of the articulation of a new myth, which will then carry on in future years. And so those of us who are initiated in this process, and I spoke about initiation at the beginning of this session, so please do go back and watch that if you didn't hear it. But we will this fall only be really initiating this process of articulating the myth of the story that our culture needs to know. And then we'll go home and continue to articulate that in our own personal ways, whatever those ways are. And hopefully in future years, we'll articulate the collective myths even further, and it should be a very exciting process is what I guess. I know there are a lot of people on the West Coast that are aware of this who are very excited about it, and I do hope you'll plan to join us. It's going to be 13 to 16 October 2023 at Mount Madonna Retreat Center in Watsonville, California. And it is being organized by the same people who organized our confluence last year. And we're getting very excited about what we're coming up with. So we look forward to seeing you out there and adding you to our process. And let's see what else we have here. Richard says, Jung went through the born again process, but didn't realize it. Well, yeah, maybe so. I mean, Richard, you keep making this Christianity referential, and, that's fine to do, but understand that it's limited, and that it need not be Christianity referential. It applies to all spiritual traditions. And so Christianity is only one of those. I'm very glad that Christianity has worked for you, but it doesn't necessarily work for all of us. And then Mario says, I see blood as steps or two entities interacting and responding, abiding by the state of its system's laws, stops movement from A minus B equals blood. Is how I see it, loss of blood. And Richard says, God gives men of great intelligence the beatific vision, but few realize it. And Mario agrees, and he says, I've seen it and been in it. I am currently within my own red book, 10 years since June of 2013. And Patrick says he definitely wants to join in that. And I really look forward to seeing you again, Patrick, because you and your brother will certainly be great contributors, since you were in the first confluence. Richard said, and Mary says, where I have seen that what is to come will emerge. And so, I hate to say it in these crass terms, but whatever the result of the Ukraine-Russia war in the short term, as I say, in the long term, there's no way that Russia can win this war, regardless of an armistice or anything like that. But what I can see is that there will be an emergence of a new way of life in the Ukraine that is quite different from what was there before, as Ukraine itself is recreated out of the rubble that Russia has left behind, and that. I'm sorry for all the blood, but at the same time, I know that something better will evolve from it. And that has been the story of our development of Western humanities since World War I, for the last 100 years. And Richard says, you need to go deeper. So many saints in waiting. It's a great thing, but you must open the door. Well, yes, we all need to open the door to it. As I've said, I've now had that door open for about 30 years, and since 1993. At least. And that it's led to me doing these sessions with all of you, and it's apparent that what I've said has been meaningful, because I have a growing online audience live every Sunday morning. We now have 23 people here, and that's basically the most people I've had online in real time, with the exception of our Wisdom Path sessions, which we do occasionally. And in one case, we had nearly 250 people live online when Mary Stein spoke to us. And so he's a famous Jungian analyst. Of course, I can't offer that, but I can point you in the right direction. That's the best I can do, and that's why I'm doing this reading of the Red Book week by week, and my personal commentary on it. So next week we will take chapter 6, which is Splitting the Spirit, and the date of that, when it happened for Jung, is December 16th, 1913. And there's a footnote which says, in Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche wrote, quote, "Anyone who fights with monsters should take care that he does not in the process become a monster. And if you gaze for long into the abyss gazes back into you." And so anyway, that is a topic for next week. And so thank you all for being here today. And I'll call it to a halt at this point, because after less than 2 hours, my voice starts to fail me. So I need to give it a break, and I'll see you next week. And for those of you who are in the advanced reading group, you will see me on Wednesday. Let me just give you the links again, so that anybody who wants to register for the advanced reading group or any part of our process can, if you go to this and click on the links for the various sessions that we hold, that's the link, you can get the notices of the links and when they're being held. I am going to try to get the Wisdom Path revivified at least once a month over the coming year. I hope to make that possible. It'll probably be done on Saturdays, but I can't keep up the pace that we were doing before, because at least temporarily I'm teaching full time. But in the future, I hope to be able to do it at least once a month. So peace, and thank you for your comments, Patrick. They've been very good. And thank you, Richard. Talk to you again soon. Peace.